Yo, what up? 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 All right, we back with another episode of Conversations with Sir. Okay, y'all know I'm Sir. I say Sir all the time. I try to stop cussing, say Sir all the time. That's how I got the name. Say something crazy, Sir. Got it. Boom. All right. So today, we're here with Kenyon. We're going to talk about a sport he created. He's going to introduce it to us. He's going to break it down for us, explain it to us, and then we're gonna have a few questions for him based off the explanation. So, good evening, sir. Good evening. How you doing today?
Good evening, man. I'm doing well. Nice to be here with you. Thank you for the opportunity, by the way. It's
Hey,
awesome.
man. Listen, we trying to get some good stuff out there, some positive stuff. Like I coach sports. I've been coaching youth sports from the 5 to the 18-year-old. So if it's some way somehow that we can help, we can help. We tied to nonprofits. We tied to youth teams, high school teams, girls, boys, all that. So if there's a way I can help you, sir, I just wanted to help. But we can't help you without knowing the proper information. You know what I mean? That makes sense. So
Definitely.
that's our biggest thing. That's why I really wanted to sit and deep dive. Is it okay to put your logo up there? Let everybody know what it look like?
Please do.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
All right.
as of now the logo, but I think it looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So let's start with your name and how people can actually find you. And let's go this way.
Yeah, so my name is Kenyon Weber, but you find me on Facebook at Kenyon Jones. I do have a Facebook page for the sport, but it's not much up and running. But as soon as we really kick it off, we'll definitely be posting there. It's under International SpeediBall Federation, and I believe I have that on Instagram too, or will under the same name. I don't know if anybody has like a Substack. It's sort of like a new social media type of thing where you can write, and like I like to write. That's one of the ways that I'm somewhat good at. So that's I've been able to write sort of the rules down and stuff like that, and explanation of sport. And so I've written. I'm gonna be writing like some articles on Substack. I already have one there about about this. And as I go, I'll probably be journaling the process of creating it. And so that's on Substack under I believe SpeediBall, the sport of the present and future. Or if you just go there and search SpeediBall, it should pop right up. And so if you want to like subscribe to that, that's like you'll get a newsletter directly to you, or you can log into the Substack app and
Substack is like a blogging site almost, but
yeah, it's
you
like
can
a
subscribe
blogging.
to get information.
Yeah, and so
Okay.
you and also it whenever I send out, it goes directly to their email too. So it's like a newsletter / blogging. So those are my two main things where I'll be probably promoting the sport.
Okay. Okay, so let's talk about where. Hold on 1 second. Let me flip back to you, so you ain't by yourself. All right, so let's talk about where did SpeediBall come from?
Yeah, so that's obviously exciting. So it's actually been over a year, believe it or not, that I've been sort of honing and refining it, because it started out as something almost totally different. Long story short, I really love sports. Even though I probably didn't really get into organized sports until like 12 or something like that, I love watching them. I love playing them. I played high school football, ran track, all that stuff. So, I've always in my head just, I'll just be imagining like, he drops back, he throws the ball. Like, it's just like, and I also wanted to go into like maybe sports journalism when I got out of high school. So, when I realized I wasn't going to be able to get a scholarship and everything, I thought, my sports journey was sort of done. And, I just went into the workforce and all that. But I've always had like the idea of starting like a new sport, even though I didn't have the rules quite down in my head, but I sort of thought that was like child's play, that's, like who does this, it's sort of like gym class recess type of thing. But, recently, I've been looking into like doing some more entrepreneurial things, and, I'll be trying things like real estate or just doing, YouTube videos or something, and it was just stuff that I wasn't like that passionate about, but stuff that the gurus would tell you, you should do this to make money or whatever. But I realized like that wasn't my alley, so I I suddenly realized, I believe it was around the time I listened to a podcast by somebody that invented the game of SpeediBall, which I don't know if you know about. How he was talking about the process of how he invented it, and now it's actually grown pretty big. He didn't invent it, but he brought it back when it sort of went dead, and then he was manufacturing all the equipment and everything. So I listened to that, and I was sort of like impressed, like, wow, he actually did start a sport. Then I sort of realized, like, look, I can maybe try to merge like two things I'm sort of passionate about, which is entrepreneurial, endeavors that I'm attempting to do, and then sports, which I actually, love to do, and maybe actually have a career in sports after all. So, I started thinking up some things. And at first it was like a really complicated sport that I was like, okay, this is not going to be something that, people are going to do, be able to institute, because there's just so much equipment, and there's so many barriers to entry into it and everything like that. So eventually, I realized, like, I need to keep it simple. So the sport that I came up with, that I've been thinking of, was, let's base it off speed. So that's where the name came from, because, like, I'm a speed guy. I'm not that tall, I'm not that big, but if you're in the NBA, unless you're 6'6", you're probably not getting to the NBA unless you're, like 300 pounds or 250 pounds. You might not get to the NFL, unless you're, a really good running back or something like that. So that was sort of the basis of it. And then, it's a really simple concept of just, there's a ball. So it's about the size. If you just think of a dodgeball, everything that, is needed for the sport can be gotten off the shelf at probably your local Walmart, right? Eventually we hope to have branded things for the sport, but right now, you can literally just get all this stuff for maybe $50 or less. So there's a dodgeball, and then there's two teams of probably ideally 11 to 12 each, sort of like in soccer. And then it's played on a football field, so like an American football field. I want to clarify that for anybody that's in the international audience, and the one side starts with the ball. It can start off with like a foot race. So whoever wins the race between two players from opposite sides can sort of be like a kickoff in football, where that's sort of like the kickoff event. And whoever wins that race, that team gets the ball, right? So maybe it'd be 50 yards, whatever, right? And then the one team gets the ball at like the 20-yard line. And the goal of the sport is just that you try to advance the ball down the field through running and throwing it, and you try to get it across the goal line, except the goal line is not like the whole goal line, because that would be way too easy, because this sport, there's not stoppages or a line of scrimmage like there is in football. So it can, players can run anywhere they want on the field at any time. Like, there's really no restrictions on player movement. So if you think of in soccer, there's no restrictions on where a player can go, right? There's no restriction on where the ball can go. The ball can go backwards, forwards, sideways, wherever. But in football, if you think about it, only the quarterback can throw the ball. There's 5 players on the team, on the offense, the offensive linemen, that aren't even allowed to catch the ball, right? Mm-hmm. Unless it pings off of an eligible receiver, and if you can really only have one person touch the ball per play besides the quarterback, unless you're doing a lateral, like 99% of the time, only the running back's going to touch the ball for 10 yards or something, or the receiver is going to catch the ball, right? Well, not here, because it's continuous play. So it's continuous play, just like in soccer. That's when I think of like the mechanics of the game, I compare it to soccer, because of the way that anybody on the field is a receiver, anybody on the field is a running back, anybody on the field is a quarterback all at once, if you want to compare it to football, right? And so, but unlike soccer, which is obviously with the feet, this is where it's American football, because it's catching the ball, it's throwing the ball, it's running the ball, right? And it's advancing it down the field. And then the way an opponent can stop it is through tagging. So it's sort of like flag football in that sense. And then at that point in time, there's an immediate turnover of the ball to the opponent, at that time. So any tag is a turnover, unlike in, football, where you might have 4 downs. There's, So I don't know if you had any questions at this point or anything, but
So, you get the ball and you get tagged. You said you automatically out. I mean,
no,
automatically turn over.
yeah, at that spot, yeah, an automatic turnover. But remember, there's a major advantage here because, like unlike in football where you can only lateral the ball backwards, in this case, since there can be a player like 5 yards ahead of you, there can be a player like 10 yards ahead of you. So if you're about to be tagged, obviously you're going to evade or elude it. That's why, being shifty, being quick, all those types of things that you see in football that, makes a good running back, being evasive, is going to be key, to dodge and duke around players and things like that. But if you're about to be tagged, you can just throw the ball to anybody. You're not restricted like, oh, I can't throw it forward. You know what I mean? Like you can't in football. Like any player on the field can throw it, and any player on the field can catch it. So that's why having a turnover at every spot, someone might be like, oh, well, that means there's going to be a whole bunch of stoppages in the game and stuff. Well, ideally there probably shouldn't be that many because players are going to be able to get rid of the ball at any point in time. Sort of like in rugby, but even in that, they can only throw it backwards. But in this, there's, so there is still an advantage for the offensive players because they're able to, throw the ball anytime, if they're about to be tagged. And then also there's really no incomplete passes because the ball hits the ground. So in this way, so like I say that it's comparable to a lot of different sports. I already brought up football, American football. I brought up, international football, which is soccer, but also basketball because the ball can hit the ground and there's not going to be an incomplete pass or it's not going to be a fumble, right? It's going to sort of just be a tussle for the ball on the ground. You know what I mean? So if you want to do a bounce pass, of the ball, because the ball is bouncy, it's like a dodgeball, right? So the ball, I realized had to be small enough so that it could be grabbed with one hand like a football, you know what I mean? So you don't want it to be like a basketball because you're not necessarily just trying to shoot it or dribble it all the time. But then also it had to be bouncy, unlike a football, like, which is not bouncy, but a dodgeball is inflatable rubber, so it bounces around the ground. So you can, if you need to, you can throw like a bounce pass like you would in basketball, but then you can also like just throw it down the field on like a nice 20-yard pass, like a quarterback in football, right? So it sort of meshes all these sports together, to make, its own unique sport and bring out what is the best of athletes, at these levels. If you think about it, what are the most athletic parts of our body? It's probably the arms and the legs. Even if you're just, say, quote unquote, a normal person just going about your day-to-day duties at your job or whatever, you're using your arms and your legs probably more than almost anything, besides your brain, obviously, and so it utilizes those, it doesn't bring restrictions into it, because in basketball, you have to dribble when you run. In football, like we just discussed, there's only certain players that can actually catch the ball or can actually run the ball, right? In rugby, you have to throw the ball backwards, right? In hockey, you have to use a stick to pass the puck around. But in this, there's really no restrictions. It's you can throw the ball, run the ball, right, up and down the field. So it's sort of like would probably go back to our most natural roots. Like if after we'd just been created, what sport would we have probably picked up? We would have probably just been throwing and running a rock or something like that. You know what I mean? So it sort of just goes back to that. But what I want to get to is probably the most important part of it, which is that the goal line. So if a goal line in football is about, well, the entire field in football is about 120 yards long, right? I mean, it is 120 yards long, but then it's like, I believe it's 53 yards across, right?
Yeah, it's
Which is about 160. Yeah, which is about 160 feet, right? So if you think about it, if it's so easy, if people will be like, oh, well, if the most logical thing that someone would think of is, oh, well, if there's really no line of scrimmage or offsides or anything like that, then you're just going to have one player run the whole way to the end zone, or all the players run the whole way to the end zone, then have the guy with the best arm on the team throw the ball way down into the end zone. And then even if it bounces, there's no incomplete passes. So chances are they'll recover it in the end zone for a touchdown. And that's going to take all the excitement out of the game because nobody has to advance the ball up and down the field, eluding defenders, right? Like that's probably what someone would think because there's continuous play and there's not like, you're not you don't have to turn the ball over after 4 downs and all that. But that's why I changed it, because I realized that fact. And so the goal line now is only about 40 feet long, right? So it can still be played on like a normal football field, as it will be, but on each side of this, so you measure out a 40-foot right across the very central part of the goal line, right? And on each side, I'm calling them trash cans for right now, because that sort of helps people visualize what it looks like, because everybody knows what a trash can is, I would think. And so, eventually we don't want it to be like a trash can, but to be like its own type of container, right? But those are on either side of that 40-foot. So you catching what I'm saying? So it's like a 40-foot line, and then, right? So then there's goal line also on the outside of each can, right? Because if it's only 40 foot, so there's 60 feet on each side, right? Yeah. So the only place you can actually score is across the 40-foot between the cans, right? You can't score across the whole goal line. You can only score between the cans.
Something like soccer. Something like soccer. You just got to designate an area like everything else.
Yeah, but it's not, unlike a net, it's just a line.
Right.
So there's still a line, right? So it's still like football related in that sense.
And it's not throwing it across the line. You just run it.
Yeah, so you're not allowed to. So unlike in football, where the end zone, you can score into the end zone, right? You can either run it across, or you can have a receiver in the end zone and catch the pass. That's a touchdown, right? But in this sport, that's not the case. So players can catch the ball in the end zone. Like, that's still in play. It's not like the field ends at the end zone, right? But if you catch the ball in the end zone, that's just like catching the ball in the field of play. You can go out and around the little place where you can score the 40-foot. You can be throwing the ball back and forth, sort of like, I don't know if you've seen hockey, how players can go behind the net, right? You know that, right? Or in lacrosse, players can go behind the net.
Yeah, they can go back
like
there.
A 10-foot area or something like that. It's the same here. So the end zone, players can go around there in attempting to score, like throwing the ball back and forth, sort of like as they're attacking the opponent's line, right? And I call that 40-foot space, I call that the speedy line, because it goes with the name of the sport, like a speedy ball, speedy line. And if you score across that line, you score what's called a speedy. I know it's sort of like, the branding of the sport, but that's not necessarily important as much as understanding what you can do and what you can't do, right? And so what makes this unique is that, unlike most sports, or unlike football, you can only score going one way, right? You can only score going into the end zone. But in this sport, because you can go run out and around the into the 60-foot space on each side of the cans, you can score coming out of the end zone, or you can score going into the end zone, as long as you score across the line. So, like, for instance, if we're playing the sport, right, and I'm at like the 5-yard line, so we're imagining a football field. I'm at like a 5-yard line. I have the ball, I'm running. Someone's about to tag me, so I throw it to you, and you've run into the end zone, right? So now you've caught it. And if you see an opening where the defending team is like, has left space on the line, you can run out of the end zone and across the line, and that's a score as much as running into the end zone, right? So that's, so that sort of adds to the uniqueness factor, because it's like now teams have to defend both sides of the goal line. You know what I mean? They can't just be looking this way or looking that way, right? So yeah, it's harder to score now because the goal line is shorter than the normal goal line, but it's also a little more difficult because teams have to be looking, forwards and backwards at, the attacking team that could be going across. Yeah, so that's a great picture. That's great.
So you talking about having trash cans here?
Yeah, it's basically on the hash marks.
And they can run around and come through here, or they can go through. But regardless, this is the scoring area.
Right. And so,
he can start here, throw the ball here. He throw the ball here. This guy runs around, comes through and catch it. And that's all legal.
Yes.
Okay.
Because the goal line, because the end zone itself is not a scoring area. Because in normal football, if you caught the ball in the end zone, you wouldn't need to run out of it because you scored a touchdown. But in this case, the end zone is not a scoring area. Only the line is the scoring area. Only the line between the cans, not even all the line. So therefore, if you caught the ball in the end zone, you would still need to go across the line to score. But your advantage then is, unlike in football, the play wouldn't be dead because the ball hit the ground or because you caught the ball. You could literally just, throw it to the corner of the end zone or throw it to this corner of the end zone. You would basically just keep dodging around and throwing the ball around and going on a, whatever the strategy of attack is until you got across while avoiding the tag, obviously, because you're obviously going to be under duress while you do it. It's not like the defending team's just going to sit there at their goal line, allowing you to just, try to maneuver across the line. They're probably going to be chasing you down. So it's going to be a game of tag too, because they're going to be trying to chase you down, get that tag. They're going to be trying to get you to throw off-target passes that are going to be able to be intercepted or going to, hit the ground at bad angles and bounce up and be able to be recovered. So it's still going to be an entire length of the field game, you know what I mean? But the most important part is going to be defending that goal line, because teams can, they can throw over it, they can throw, they can run behind it, anything. But the team that's trying to score can only run across that area between the cans if they have the ball. So if they don't have the ball, they have to run out and around the cans. It's not, because it would, it's a disadvantage, for them to, it's a disadvantage for the defending team if the team that's on the attack can just, be running across the goal line even without the ball. So the defending team can run across that any part of the goal line, including between the cans, but only the attacking team can, only the attacking team can only run across that goal line if they have the ball. You know what I mean?
So it's like goaltending.
Yeah, it sort of is like goaltending. Now, obviously, you're probably going to need more than just one person to defend a 40-foot line. You probably might need 2 or 3, and obviously you're going to have different levels. So,
I'm sorry, not goaltending. What is it? 3 seconds in a box. What is it? 3 in the what?
Are you talking about the 3-second violation in basketball?
Yeah. So you can't hang out in the area. You can't just chill out and wait until your number get called. You got to actually go do some work.
No, well, so the defending team can technically, but I don't think it would advantage them, because if you think about it, you only have at the most probably 12 players on your team on the field, and that's a huge field. It isn't like a basketball court that's only like 94 feet. So you're going to want to have players all up and down the field trying to defend and get a takeaway, because you aren't going to always want to start against your own goal line. So you're not going to have just 5 players sitting at the goal line. You're going to want to have players the length of the field trying to defend and get a turnover at the 50-yard line or, whatever, so you can go back the other way, because trying to work the ball 120 yards all the time, you're not going to always be able to score. So, that's going to obviously take away your numbers at the goal line. And that's part of the strategy. It's like, should I have more numbers at the goal line, or should I have more numbers in the middle of the field, and obviously since there's no restrictions, unlike in football, players can go wherever they, the coach wants them to go, or wherever they need to go to make a play, so if they're, just because you're a defender on the goal line doesn't mean you have to stay there like you're a goalie in hockey or something. Like if you need to, you can hustle up the field, if the ball's up there, but obviously then you might leave your goal line defenseless and they might get a breakaway. They might score from like a 50-yard run or something like that. Right. So that's what the strategy is. And I actually sort of broke it down into, like, if you think about it, there will probably be like 3 position groups, like Rangers, Raiders, and Rovers, so like the Rangers are more the defenders, and the Rovers are like the midfielders, and the Raiders would be, the players that play nearest the other team's goal line and probably score the most, so that's sort of like some position grouping that you can think of mentally of, like, how it would play out on a field, because there has to be strategy to it, because you're not just going to let a team just run 80 yards down the field and be like, okay, well, now we're going to start defending them at our own goal line. It's like, no, you're probably going to want to do that beforehand, because as soon as they get that close to their goal line uninhibited, the chances are they're going to score is going to go up. Right. So,
and I got another question.
Yeah.
All right. So let's say John is here.
Right.
He throws the ball allegedly to Bob. Bob is here, but John throws the ball all the way down here. So now they are running down for the ball, but the defender, I'm pointing to the screen like you can see. So look, everybody running down here, right? So let's say the defender is coming down here. Right. What if Bob kicks the ball all the way to the other side to his own player? Is that legal?
Yeah, so this is an important part that I'm glad you brought up. There is no kicking allowed in this game. Now,
So you can't use your feet. You can only use your hands.
yes, because if you think about it, there's a game that's literally designed specifically for kicking. If people want to play a game specifically for kicking, they can play soccer. Which I actually like soccer. I like both American football and international football. I think they were both my inspirations in like coming up for this sport. I sort of melded the two, but this game is like soccer only in the way that players have freedom of movement to go all over the field with no restrictions of who can receive the ball. But as far as kicking the ball, there's kicking in football, there's kicking in rugby, there's kicking in Australian rules football, there's kicking in soccer. So in this game, I'm trying to not have kicking involved, and I'm trying to just have it a game like based off the hands. Actually, kicking is a penalty in this sport, which gives an automatic point to the other team and the ball at the 50-yard line or wherever the spot of the penalty was. I don't really want to go into that minutia that's in the rule book, but I just want to get to the basics of what the game is. But yeah, kicking is not allowed. But if he can throw the ball, like for instance, I imagine that there will be – so if we're thinking about like getting a team together, like you and me are like, we're going to put a team together to play this sport, like who are we going to – what type of players and what type of athletes are we going to get together? If we're playing competitively here, like we would get wide receivers. We would get running backs. We would get quarterbacks, right? So, but then also like they obviously have the skills to do the other things, but chances are, they're going to be best at what they normally do. So, they're going to be, we're going to want to meld that all together because it has the skills of all of that. So if somebody can throw a 50-yard pass, as most likely, if you played quarterback before or something like that, then more power to them. That's going to help in the sport because, instead of having to elude players maybe through, speed or something like that, you're going to be able to, throw the ball down the field to somebody that's wide open, 20 yards down the field. So if you can do that, like you're allowed to do that. And you can throw it behind you 50 yards if you need, if that's the only open player, but it saves you from being tagged and you keep possession of the ball, then yeah, that's great. Obviously, once again, it makes it better that, it makes it, it's not easy for players to just throw the ball down the field and then, score because there is that, the part that they have to actually run the ball across the goal line. So it's not like I can just throw the ball 50 yards to somebody that's in the end zone, sort of like I was talking before, and then that's a score because that would make everything like way too easy and take away the excitement. But, if they threw the ball 50 yards to the end zone, they would still have to find a way to pick their way across the goal line. You know what I mean? So that would still have that, constant activity and motion and everything that that would bring excitement. I think that, that was actually one of my defining phrases that was in my head as I was going through the iterations of the sport, because there's been other parts of the sport that I threw away and was like, no, this is not good. This is not, but it was like a game of constant motion and continuous movement. I don't want it to be
like
stuck, stagnant, or stale.
Like basketball, you just keep going, keep going, keep going.
Right.
What about timeouts?
Right. So there should be, as far as like right now, I just sort of went with the timeout structure of the other sports. Like you get 3 a half, because I want it to be like something that people recognize almost right away. As far as like, okay, this is the way. There's 4 quarters. There's like 3 timeouts a half. There's, there's penalties. There's things that they would recognize from other sports. That this can be played on a football field. You don't really have to add much other infrastructure except literally like a trash can. Like you can use football cleats, you know what I mean? You can use football gloves to catch the ball because you're still going to want to have some grip. But there is one thing though that I want to add that is actually a really important part that I hadn't quite got to, but I'll try to just quickly add it. And that is that the trash cans are either side. Like I didn't just add them because I'm like, oh, I just need a something to mark out 40 feet. Which is about, I believe, 13 yards or so. If so, you could just use cones or something for that. But the trash cans, you can actually score into those, right? So that sort of adds another dynamic that is sort of like basketball, right? So, but now the points are not worth as much because it's easier to shoot and score, well, I would assume, than it is to, run across a goal line. So teams are going to, because it's going to be worth 2 points to run across the line versus just 1 point to score, or maybe like 2 points to score into the bucket and like 4 points to score across the line. I haven't quite figured out the points 100%, and people honestly can do this as they want. Like, it's not like, oh, once everybody agrees on what the point structure should be, then everybody should keep it so that statistics are even across the board. But, as the cans are so like, if you're running at me and I don't really have anyone to throw it to and I'm down near the goal line, like I can shoot a Steph Curry from 25 feet out or something, and I can hit, if I hit the can, that's going to be a point for me and my team, right? Because and so that adds to the dynamic of what the defensive team has to do, is they also sort of have to defend that can, right? Because the can on each side. So there's two cans they can shoot in. So, that's sort of like, adding the shooting, because there's sports where you shoot into a net, whether it's soccer, basketball, hockey, and then there's sports where you run across the line, rugby, football. So that sort of combines like line sports and basket sport or net sports, into one, So, I think even basketball players would, sort of like that part, so if there's, guys on the team that are good at basketball, everybody sort of has their role, defined like within the team. And even, believe it or not, the reason I chose an inflatable rubber ball too is because it can actually be bounced. Like if you play it on a, because I've tested it myself at my, local football field, so if you have turf, which most high schools I believe do, or even very well manicured, just grass, on a football field, it will bounce. It will bounce almost as good as a basketball bounces on the court on hardwood. So there's actually a part of the game which I don't want to get too deep with your audience and confuse them like crazy, but you can actually bounce the ball too in this sport, right? So now most people are going to run it because running is obviously the easiest way to advance the ball, and it's based off speed and quickness and all that type of stuff. But if you want to bounce the ball, you can bounce the ball like you're bouncing it in basketball, right?
So I can hit a 50-yard run like Tyreek Hill and stop and cross him up like Kyrie Irving.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody has that skill set, obviously that skill set is going to have to be developed, right? Because obviously basketball players and football players both think that they can play basketball and football, but obviously there's a different level to playing it at a high level, each sport individually. But in you can do that. And the reason I added that was not just because like, I want to have bouncing in the game, which even though that's pretty cool, because I just told you, like, if I'm running the ball and you tag me, it's a turnover, right? If I'm bouncing the ball, if I'm dribbling it and you touch me, that's not a turnover because I'm dribbling it. Now, obviously, I'm at risk of turning the ball over on the dribble, though, because it's way easier to turn a ball over that's being dribbled, whether it's a soccer ball, whether it's, you're dribbling with your feet or you're dribbling with your arms like a basketball. You can steal the ball way easier, right? So you're basically like it's either, you might risk turning the ball over, by getting tagged. You might risk turning the ball over by getting stolen, but there's different parts of the field and different parts of the game where one might be more important than the other. For instance, in tight areas, right, where you're going to get touched, and that's a tag, right? But if you start dribbling it, like say down near the goal line, you get touched, it's not. As long as you have the skills, of like Kyrie Irving, or you have the skills of even like most basketball players to be able to control the ball through traffic, right? So down in those areas, you might want to switch to a dribble, right? If you have that type of skill set, right? Now, some players might not have that skill set. They got to, throw the ball away to somebody else, or they might need to, just try to do some crazy moving. And also there's another part of the game, which I don't want to get too crazy, but if you leap, right? If you're leaping in the air and you're touched, that's not a turnover either, right? So it's sort of like, this is more so like if you're if you're in traffic, right? So say you're at like the 5-yard line and then there's like 3 players coming at you, you might want to leap through them, which would initiate contact, but then to leap across the goal line, right? Because as long as the ball's held out across the goal line, that's a score. So if you're touched in the middle of that leap, it's not a turnover because you're in the air at that point in time, right? So there's some things that I built into it so that it's not like just a sport of just one thing of like, so there's more diversity within, and so there can be more excitement. So there can be more skills that kids can practice on, and honestly, the skills are all just skills that they've probably been practicing, since they were into sports, whether if they've been playing basketball and football, or, most kids play those sports in one way or the other, whether, officially on teams or whether, just in their backyard or whatever. So it's not something like some far out stuff that, American kids haven't been practicing since they were, into sports, so that just, it just sort of combines all those things into something that's, in my view, I think more exciting than, for instance, flag football. I think it would be a better substitute for flag football than flag football is, because flag football is basically just like, normal football, but then like without the hitting and stuff. So it's like, what's the point? Because if I want to watch football, I want to watch like, real football.
Right.
But this, now only the quarterback can, throw the ball. And so it's just a bunch of receivers throwing the ball. There's no, so that's why I think this is a better version. But anyways, go ahead.
So what about frisbee ball? Or I don't know if that's what it's called, but I don't know if you ever seen it. Yeah, the frisbee, when they run and like it's like 6-7 people and they throw it, and where you catch it from, you throw it again until you get all the way down the field, just like the football field.
Yeah, so I watched. Yeah, so I watched that, and I was interested in that, and yeah, but it's not the reason. How it differs from mine is that in frisbee, first off, it's a sport like not based off speed. Really, it's more on the act. It's more, they put the emphasis on how well you can play frisbee. You know what I mean? You basically how well you can throw it, and that means like when you catch the frisbee, you have to stop, right? So you're not allowed to run with the frisbee. This combines running and throwing. So I mean, there's multiple differences, but that's the main one. So if I'm throwing the frisbee to you, you catch it, congratulations. But now you have to stop, and you have about, I forget what they say, is it 10 seconds or something, to throw the frisbee to another player. And yeah, those guys are like really good. I mean, because you're basically standing there and you have to, with pinpoint. Now the other players on the field can run around, and
so what about like a tip ball? So if you throw it to me and I tip it across the field, I tip it to somebody else, is that legal?
Yeah, definitely, because there's no, like I said, there's really no restrictions on player movement or ball movement. There's really, so
you don't have honestly, to catch it and hold it and none of that.
Right. And so I know it sounds like I just keep making these things up as I go along, but honestly, it is actually in the rules. So if so let's say you and me are going after a ball that's either in the air or on the ground, right? And then like we both sort of tap it, right? So we're like going after it, sort of like a fumble in football, right? Where everybody's just going and the ball's just going all over the field like crazy, and it's just like really exciting play, right? Well, that's probably going to happen in this sport too, because if somebody like throws a ground ball along the ground, or a ball gets tipped, it's going to end up on the ground, and because it's a live ball, unlike in football where a fumble is the only type of live ball, there's no incomplete pass live ball. Players are going to keep going after it. Like the play doesn't stop. The play is continuous. So the ball's going to be bouncing along the ground. You and me are going for it. We both tap it. Then somebody touches me, right? So technically I would normally be tagged, right? But I'm not, because if I don't have control of the ball, if I'm not gripping the ball and I'm tagged or I'm touched, that's not a tag. You know what I mean? You have to actually have control of the ball, right? So that's why, in a sense, it's also like volleyball, because it's like, if I'm able to bat the ball to you without touching it, or if I'm like open-handed or closed fist, or like just sort of like punch it along the ground or something, then that's totally legal. And also it might save me, like if the ref rules, that I never touched, I never had control of the ball, then even no matter how many times, even if 5 players were like touching me at once, like, and I was, I wouldn't be tagged, because I got rid of the ball without having control of it. Now, obviously, the key part of this sport is going to be like training the refs to know, I mean, it's not, I don't believe that's that difficult, but because, I mean, like, we have 2-hand touch football and all that stuff. So, we're used to officiating that type of stuff. But basically, officiating what is an actual tag, just making sure that everybody knows what that is and what type of touching is not a tag. You know what I mean? That's the key part. Like knowing, like if a player is like intentionally in the air, I'm not just talking about like a player just starts running and both their feet are off the ground, but like a player is intentionally leaping, in their touch while they're still in the air. As long as they got rid of the ball before their feet touch the ground, on the tag, that's not a tag. You shouldn't blow the whistle as a turnover. You should just, you should let that play continue. If a player is dribbling the ball along the ground, and they're touched, do not blow the whistle, because that's illegal, as long, you know what I mean? I mean, they're just risking the ball being turned over through, a steal or something. But, there's the only time that a player is actually tagged is when they're running or, walking or whatever, while they have control of the ball, so yeah.
Okay. So, you pretty much answered everything. in those parts. Have you thought about how many refs?
Yeah. So I believe we need at least 5, which, would still be, I believe, more than basketball, but a little less than normal football, which I believe has 7. But I believe we need 5 because
1, 2, 3, 4. I'm sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, and one in the middle.
Yeah. So if so a field is 120 yards long, divided by 4 is 30 yards. So there should be a ref every 30 yards. So that's adds up to 4. And then there should be one central ref that, is the main guy, and just sort of like officiate the sidelines and all that type of stuff. And also there should always be one ref, which is the one ref that's near the goal lines on each side. They're mainly going to be watching the goal line. You know what I mean? Because that's where most of the action is going to be taking place. So that's a key area to have one ref there and one ref on the other side. But I still don't think you need more than 5 total. But so there is one other fact. There is something else too that I wanted to bring up, and that is that in hockey how players can come onto the ice at any time. You know that, right? I don't know if you. Okay, so there's in football only on timeouts, right? In basketball only on timeouts,
right?
Or foul shots, whatever. In this sport, there is so. I envision that the game now. Obviously, this could be tweaked out as the game is played, and they're like, okay, no, we need less players and we need more players because it's too easy to score, it's too hard to score. Along with the points thing and everything. But I envision that the game will be probably played with 12 players because, soccer is played with 11. Even football is played with 11 on 11, even though there's 22 total, but 11 on 11. So I envision like a full football field is probably going to need 11 to 12 players, right? So, however, there's also going to be about 5 to 6 players that are in this area on the sideline that's probably about 5 to 10 yards. It can be marked off with cones. And those players are the players that are allowed to come on the field at any time. If the player that's subbing for them gets off the field, so you can't have too many men on the field is obviously a penalty. So that's something the refs can watch. But like you can run off, unlike in football, you can run off the field at any time. So like I'm tired, I need a breather.
What about any location?
No, it's going to be within it's going to be an area from the 45 to the 45.
Is this team A on this sideline and team B on this sideline, correct?
No, it's team A on this sideline, team B on the other sideline, like in football.
All right. So, and if this team B or team A, and if he needed to come off, if one of their players needed to come off and he ran off this side, that would be illegal.
Yes. I mean, you can't. I mean, obviously, if I'm in pursuit of someone and then I run out of bounds accidentally, that's fine. Okay. But if I run out of bounds and then, I need to run out of bounds to the area where I can go be subbed in for, or subbed out for, whatever, Uh-huh. So yeah. So that's but the key part is that each team. So this is where strategy is involved. So if someone wants to be a coach in this sport, which I'm hoping to push it through high schools, and we can talk about that if you want, like how I'm actually trying to get it out there. But if someone would like want to be a coach or something, like this is part of the strategy of it. Is like you only get like 6 players, or the number can change up or down, that can actually sub into the game, live in game. You know what I mean? The rest of the players on the roster, say there's 30 players on a roster, the rest of those players that are not, the 12 that are on the field, they can only come in during timeouts or in between quarters like a normal football game, right? But these players can be subbed in and out, or I guess in football they can be subbed in between plays, but not live in play. You know what I mean? But so these 6 players are going to have to be like some of your best, substitutes, and they're going to have to be like, the players that can sort of fill what holes you need. You're like, oh, I need this guy here because he's got this, he's got a good arm and we need that at this point in the game. Okay, I'm going to have him come off the field and you're going to go in. You know what I mean? So that can be played continuous, right? You're not. It's a penalty and it's illegal to just sub in like a guy that you did not put, because that's going to be part of the roster that you give to the. You got to
mark him as going in, and then
yeah. It's basically called a live action rotation. Like you're not allowed to put a guy that you didn't put in that box or in the field of play. You're not allowed to put them into the game live during the game, right? So it's sort of like as that strategy. And also it helps, because the game is going to take a lot of longevity, because there's going to be speed and going, all those yards back and forth without a lot of stoppages. obviously to keep the game exciting and fresh and played at the speed you want, just like with hockey, the reason they do it is so that, you can get fresh bodies onto and keep that pace of speed. So that's going to be an important factor.
All right. So you gave us a lot of information that I believe a lot of people are going to have to go back and analyze, because you might have heard something at the beginning and got to the end and then got confused again. So real quick, not real quick, take your time, sir. Right. Give us 5 reasons why we should support this.
Right. So the reason that I believe that this should be supported, first off, because I honestly believe that it is an affordable and therefore an accessible sport. And also it's a safe sport, right? So you can just look at the numbers, like honestly, just do even the slightest Google search on concussions in the NFL, youth football, high school football, college football, and honestly, I don't even need to explain it. Like, there's definitely a problem. You know what I mean? It's been a problem for years, but people have just sort of been pushing it under the rug because football is our favorite sport, and I love football. Don't get me wrong, but right. But now people are suddenly like taking this seriously. Like, okay, we need to find a way. I mean, you even see the NFL go into this weird cap thing on the head. Just to see, will that work, and all this stuff. And you see them pushing. They have NFL flag. They're really trying to push that out there. I believe that's going to be the Olympics in 4 years as well. They're going to be, there's actually be flag football because they want to. I believe they want to test and see, like, if they went to a flag league, within the next 50 years, what's going to happen. So we're going towards safer sports, and I believe that this is a bet. Like, if we're going to transition toward flag football, or if more people are going to, I believe this is a better version of that because, like I mentioned, because it's not just the quarterback throwing the ball, and it's not based off downs. It's actually like, there's more players are involved at more times, and there's also just more things to it, like dribbling, leaping, shooting the ball, like in basketball. I believe that it's just going to add more excitement to that. And like, if you want your kids to be involved in a sport that's got a lot of the same skill sets as football, you know what I mean? If they've been practicing football their entire lives, like that's good, because they're going to need to have that same type of, practicing routes, practicing catching, practicing throwing the ball. You know what I mean? Practicing covering receivers. Like, you're still going to have to do all of that, but now you're doing it on a different sport, a sport where it's highly unlikely you're going to get, some crazy concussion, right? And then also the next part is because it's also affordable. Unlike, for instance, like hockey and baseball are just two that come to my mind right at the top of my head. Like, if you want to get your kid into hockey, I mean, I believe this is why, a lot of minorities don't play hockey, not because we aren't good at it, but because it's just really expensive to get into, and to get that good equipment, I believe, can even run parents like thousands of dollars. So, it sort of cuts down on the pool of talent that can actually even play that sport. And if you go to, baseball, to get like the good bats, the good gloves, if you're a catcher, to get the good gear, that's the top notch, I don't think it's even that much cheaper than hockey itself. So, this is affordable because it's literally, you really just need a ball. You know what I mean? So why is soccer the most popular sport in the world? It might not be in the US, but around the world, it definitely is, because you can literally pick up not even a real soccer ball and start practicing like you're Ronaldo and end up going to the big league. If you have the skill and you have the talent, you don't need to go buy skates and hockey mask and and a helmet and hockey stick, all that type of stuff. And so that's sort of why I hone this down, to make it super simple, that, it's really just playing tag. You can go get the ball for this sport. You can get it for like $5 at Walmart, right? Because it's just about a 5 to 7 inch in diameter ball, and then you can be practicing it. You know what I mean? And, that's what I'm trying to, start a league, in my hometown, and just, sort of get that as like the launch league, and get the video highlights out there, and then have people be like, hey, I want to start this in my town, and then sort of organically like start a 21st century sport. Most of our sports were started in like, I don't know, 1900s, not the 1800s, thousands of years ago, right? Yeah. And so it's like, it might be time to like look at what what can we do better? How can we be? I mean, obviously, sports is about playing it, but then for the fans, it's about being entertained. And I believe that this would bring the entertainment, because it's got the same level of action that football has. It probably more because football is just a bunch of action in like 10 to 15 second splits. You know what I mean? So yeah, those would be the main factors as to why I believe that we should support it. Because my goal is to to see kids, and another reason too is because it can be played by females too. Because if you look at football, it's such a male-dominated sport, but this is like basketball in the sense that it's not an overly collision sport or anything like that. So you can have teams of girls. You can even play a co-ed. You know what I mean? If you can have a co-ed team, you can have a just the boys team. You can have just the female team too. But so it's not exclusive in that way. It's not discriminatory in that way where it's just like by the nature of the sport. You're just not going to see females in football. But this, I would expect about the same amount. I believe that you could have a girls team at a school and a boys team at a school starting at the same time. Because obviously the skill levels are going to be different. Each one, but I'm just saying like you can have like a girls program that goes and plays other girls programs and a male that goes and plays other male programs, and I think that's key because I think that would help it, to catch on because, people want to feel included and like they actually have an opportunity and a chance at it. So all those, are, reasons that I think that why we should be excited about it and why, we should at least give it a chance, even if even if right now you honestly don't even understand it. Like I can understand that because like I'm just talking about a lot of stuff, just trying to get a lot of stuff out. But I can promise you, as soon as I'm able to get things together and get this on video, people are going to easily understand it because it's really simple, right? It's just, explaining something for the first time that people have ever heard it can be difficult, just sort of like hearing it. But once I believe like it's sort of like fire, it might be really hard to start a fire with like a rock or stone, but as soon as it starts, unfortunately, it can spread like crazy. And that's the thing too with with anything that's new, if it's it's about getting it started. But once people catch on to it, and see it in action, I do believe they'll be like, wow, like this is actually sort of cool, but I think it's just getting enough people to have enough faith to be like, yeah, I want to like throw some money behind this, I want to donate to the cause, like and see if this would take off. Maybe this is an option that kids are going to like better, and we can see success with it.
Okay, so one last time, your email address.
KCJS 123 at outlook.com.
And your Instagram, because you said you're active more on Instagram, right?
Oh no, I can't even remember if I set up an account there with Instagram. I would say Facebook is usually Facebook. Where I'm. Are you talking about the Facebook for the sport?
No, so people can reach out to you.
Oh, so I'm under Facebook at Kenyon Jones. So if you search Kenyon Jones, you should easily find me.
And you respond back to messages. So if they inbox you, you gonna respond back.
Oh, definitely.
Because I know a lot
especially
of people
if it's about the sport. Because I'm really passionate and I really just want to see it succeed. And anybody that wants to help or be a part of it or more interested, please do reach out, and I would love to talk to you about it.
All right. So after we end this, I got some stuff that I know in my area. I don't know if you have it down there, but I'm gonna kick it to you so you can see if you can connect with them. But before we get out of here, is there any last thing? So let me ask you. So I know you want to get the sport going. You want to try to get it in schools. You want to get people active. You want to spread it out there like this. Let's say a school picked you up today. What would this sport look like in 10 years?
Yeah, within 10 years, I honestly believe like we'd have kids that are playing this at like a professional level, because it's like anybody that's been playing, a sport, the reason that the athletes are so good now is they're starting at like 6 years old with playing whatever sport it is. And then, they get, they get to the level where, depending on their talent, they might be going pro, so that the goal would be to have it in all high schools, the majority of high schools and a large majority of colleges, within 10 years, or at least like have it as like a test program or a pilot program, in those schools. Because obviously the nature of a sport is, if you have one high school doing it, you probably need like 5 to 10 doing it, because they're going to need people to play against. You're going to need a conference of people that are all in the same area. You're going to need the state to sanction it, right? That would be the goal too, is to have it be a state sanction.
Or they're going to be traveling state to state,
right?
Trying to find the team to play.
Yeah, so I'd love to have all 50 states like have sanctioned it within 10 years, which basically means that, I believe it, it gets the funding that it needs, just like all the other programs. Because when the state, there is sort of like a building mechanism for sports where, the state will fund it, because it's like an educational, purpose. And that's, football, basketball, all the main sports are, you know what I mean? And I mean, there's even sports now that are trying to grab that funding too, like, flag football for girls and stuff is something that, program, school by school is starting to like pick up, and some, probably just starting this year, so it's been like, it's a graduate. So it is happening. Like there are things being added to schools, sports that we wouldn't normally play, maybe like baton twirling and things like that, are being added, so schools are open to doing that if they see the interest within their student body, and if they see that, there could be a success rate. Obviously, they can gain some type of revenue from it and all that type of stuff. So it's just sort of up to the people that are passionate about it to push it forward. You know what I mean? To be like, hey, like obviously we can start our like grassroots leagues, as I'm trying to do, sort of like, little league baseball type of leagues. You know what I mean? But to really get it out there, it probably has to go through high schools and colleges and stuff. So it's about those that are passionate about it to really push like their local school boards and stuff to be like, yeah, you see how this sport is sort of like growing, and how can we get this into the school, and that's why I started this organization called the International SpeediBall Federation. It's a nonprofit, and the goal of it is going to be like, when it's really up and running, is to be sort of like the governing body of it, not necessarily like build every league around the whole country or world, but to be like, the rules defining agency, and to really, promote and build the sport wherever, and to work with people to do that. Sort of like, we have a governing body of like, every Olympic sport, you know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, the goal is to, high school and colleges, and one day, hopefully maybe within 30 to 50 years, maybe even have the start of some type of professional league. Like that would be even great too. But right now, I think it's just, you got to start at the grassroots level. You got to start with like the kids and everything. You can't just cheat and go right to like, try to just, let's put a professional league together. It's like, no, even the people that are professional athletes in other sports would not even be quite as good at this sport as you would think, because they haven't practiced it as much. They practice the skill sets of it. They, might have played, they'd be pretty decent, but they'll be so much better if you've brought them from like 8 years old up through the programs, and they're, invested in it, and like, this is their sport of choice. And like, you'll actually see, like, say by the time they're 22, the ability to actually play professionally at a level that we would expect professionals to play a sport at. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Well, I think it was a lot of information. I think it's a I'm not going to say good idea, because I think it has some good aspects to it. Good idea. I don't know. I haven't seen the really kids play it, and we got some athletic kids, so I think they might like it. I know summertime coming around, we do a lot of things in the community during the summer, so I'm gonna reach out to you. I'm gonna make a few phone calls and reach out and see if we can maybe kind of get some groundwork going. But I think it's a fresh idea and a fresh start, and something different that people won't expect. You know what I mean? There's only be a lot of goddamn explaining to do. But I mean,
yeah. So that's
yeah.
So that's my goal. Is because obviously it's a spring and summer sport, and the reason it hasn't really been, I don't have all the highlights and stuff is because it's been winter here since seemingly forever. And when I eventually got to this version of the sport, I wasn't even able to get the groups of people together to play it. But that's going to be the goal. Like starting, hopefully in February, I want to eliminate the need for the explanation, because you said you need to see it played to see if it's a good idea, and I agree. because and so that's my working thing, because I can cut all this down to like 5 minutes. If I can get like a group of decent athletes together, whether they're youth athletes, male, whatever, it doesn't really matter the first time, and get a good videographer and a good editor together, I can put like a 10 to 15 minute rule book video together. You know what I mean? And kids can watch that, and honestly, they'll probably get it with it faster than me or you, because they just get things, because I know it's really simple. It's just explaining things for the first time can always be, difficult when you're just putting it down in writing as like the bedrock of like, okay, this is what refs are going to look at, because the NFL rule book is, I don't know, over 100 pages long, but everybody can usually understand football,
Maybe
baseball's rule book is crazy long, but it just comes down to hitting the ball with the stick. I mean, it's pretty simple. You know what I mean? So that's the thing. Like, the rules are long just because you have to have, in case this happens, what is the rule in that case, stuff like that. But playing it is going to be super simple, and that's my next goal. Get players together, get them playing the sport, get like me, explaining, okay, this is why this was allowed to happen, or this is why this was allowed to happen, in explaining, the rules basically on video as people watch the sport. And I think that will eliminate a lot of the confusion and bring a lot more of the excitement.
All right. Well, sir, here at the network, sir, we wish you the best of luck. Hope your dreams come even remotely true. Just to get it in 4 schools right now would be, a great stepping stone. You know what I mean? And just to get your feet wet, you know what I mean? Because we all got to start somewhere. And for you to take your time out and write a 50-page manual on how to play this means that you are serious about this. Like, this is not something you just, I'm going to get a logo, I'm going to come up with this, and you got like 3 or 4 pages, but it's not laid out. You wrote a 50-page manual, sir. And that just told people that you are serious about this. This is not something that you just thought up in the basement while you was washing dishes. You know what I mean? You took your time, sir, and I commend you, because I know how hard it is to put the stuff together. I've been a program director. I've been the head coach. I've ran the nonprofits. Like, I did all that, so I know how much work you put in, sir. But this was definitely a detailed interview, sir, and I thank you for coming through and sharing your time with us, your information with us. We wasn't trying to go over hour, but damn it, we did. But it was good. It was good information, though. It was good information. It's not like, oh man, he just won't stop talking. It was very good information, and you did a detailed breakdown of everything that we needed to know for this. And I do appreciate that, because now, if I was to go and when this show come out, send it to somebody that I know, they were like, man, what's this you sent me? Oh man, just listen to it. He got something good going on. What is it? I don't know. I can sit down and I could give them, the key points. You know what I mean? And not just say, oh man, listen to what he got to say. Here goes email address. No, I can say that, hey, these are the key points. He has this, and that. And if they like to do this, they like to do that. You put both these together, add a little bit of this, and this is what you have. SpeediBall. You know what I mean? So I know a few people with a lot of kids. And I'm definitely going to try to kick this out to them.
And I appreciate it. I really do. I thank you once again for having me on. This was really my first big break in this. So, if there's any type of success that comes from this, we're forever connected at the hip, man. Because, I really, really appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm definitely. And, before we do anything, I'm going to have to reach out to you, you know what I mean, and get your approval, because this is yours. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to, take people's shit. But yes, so we'll definitely be in touch, sir. So, any last words before we end this?
No, I mean, my last words is our slogan, and that SpeediBall is the sport of the present and future.
SpeediBall is a sport, the present and the future. Yep. You heard him. He said it. He meant it. He stand on it.
Yep.